For 8 years, I thought I had a solid marriage with Laura. We had our ups and downs like any couple, but lately things had changed. She started going out more frequently, coming home late with vague explanations about spending time with friends or working overtime. One night when Laura returned from what she called a meeting with colleagues, I simply asked about her evening. What happened next changed everything. She exploded, yelling, "I am not your property, Jesse." That moment marked the beginning of the end. Before I continue with how I proved to Laura she was not my responsibility either, let me know where you are watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button to follow my journey through heartbreak to freedom. I met Laura at my previous company 10 years ago. She immediately caught my attention with her intelligence, independence, and ambition. These qualities drew me to her like a magnet. We dated for 2 years before deciding to tie the knot, and those early marriage years were nothing short of wonderful. We bought our first house together, traveled to places we had always dreamed of, and supported each other as we built our careers. Laura worked in marketing, while I specialized in financial analysis. We complemented each other perfectly, or so I thought. We had discussions about starting a family but agreed to establish our careers first. Life seemed to be following the path we had envisioned together. Our weekend routines were simple but fulfilling. Saturday mornings meant coffee on our porch, followed by a hike or bike ride. Sundays were for meal prep, and occasionally having friends over for dinner. Marcus, my best friend since college, and his wife Julia were regular visitors. Laura got along well with them, and our social circle was tight-knit and supportive. However, about 3 years into our marriage, subtle changes began to appear. At first, they were so minor I barely noticed them. Laura started talking about needing more personal space and independence within our relationship. While I valued her autonomy and wanted her to pursue her interests, something about the way she framed these requests felt off. Around this time, Laura got a new boss at work, David Turner. According to Laura, David was a marketing genius who had worked with several high-profile companies before joining their firm. She began staying later at the office, claiming that working closely with David was advancing her career faster than she had anticipated. I supported her ambition, even when it meant she missed our regular dinner dates or weekend activities. Then came the suspicious text messages. I never intentionally snooped through her phone, but sometimes notifications would pop up on her screen that made me uncomfortable. Messages arriving late at night, often when she was in another room. I noticed how she would smile at her phone, then quickly turn it over when I entered the room. When I casually asked who was texting so late, she would dismiss it as just work stuff or just Amanda planning our girls' night. Laura changed her phone password, something she had never done before. She became protective of her device, never leaving it unattended. I tried to discuss these changes with her, expressing my concerns about her growing distance, but she accused me of being paranoid and controlling. "You need to trust me, Jesse," she would say. "Why are you suddenly so suspicious of everything I do?" The situation continued to deteriorate. Laura began going out more frequently with colleagues, but never invited me to join these gatherings. When I suggested accompanying her, she would claim they were boring work events that I would not enjoy. She would return home smelling of unfamiliar cologne, sometimes slightly intoxicated, with vague explanations about where she had been. One day, while doing laundry, I found a receipt in her jacket pocket for an expensive restaurant downtown. When I asked about it, casually wondering if she had gone there for a business lunch, she became defensive and claimed she had lost the receipt from an office lunch David had organized. Something did not add up, but I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. My suspicions grew when I overheard a phone conversation between Laura and someone I presumed was David. Her tone was flirtatious, and she quickly ended the call when she realized I was within earshot. When I inquired about the call, she claimed it was Amanda, but the deep voice I had briefly heard was definitely not female. The small lies accumulated. She told me she was going shopping with Amanda one Saturday. But when I ran into Amanda's husband at the gym, he mentioned Amanda was visiting her parents out of state. When confronted, Laura claimed I had misunderstood, and she had actually gone with another friend named Samantha, someone she had never mentioned before. I noticed Laura and David frequently scheduled weekend work sessions. According to her, they were preparing a major pitch for a potential client. I suggested bringing them lunch one day, but Laura immediately shut down the idea, saying they worked better without interruptions. Then came the night that changed everything. Laura had texted she would be working late with David on their project. By 1:00 a.m., she still was not home, and my texts went unanswered. When she finally walked through the door, she seemed surprised to find me still awake. As she put her purse down, a receipt fell out. I picked it up and saw it was from La Maison, one of the most expensive romantic restaurants in town. The bill included 2 steaks and a bottle of champagne totaling over $300. How was the work session? I asked, calmly holding up the receipt. Laura froze momentarily before her expression hardened. Are you going through my things now? The receipt fell out of your purse, I explained. I thought you were working late at the office. This is from La Maison. Instead of explaining or apologizing, Laura exploded. So what if I went out to dinner? Am I supposed to check in with you about every move I make? I am not your property, Jessie. I have the right to do what I want. Her reaction was so disproportionate to my simple question that it confirmed everything I had been suspecting. This was not about independence or personal space. Something else was going on, and I was determined to find out what. After that night, I began paying closer attention to Laura's behavior. Not in an obsessive way, but I stopped dismissing the red flags my brain had been registering. Our joint bank account showed purchases I knew nothing about. Expensive jewelry I never saw her wear. Charges from hotels downtown, even though we lived just 15 minutes away from her office. Laura had also changed her social media profiles, where once her profile picture had been a photo of us from our anniversary trip to Hawaii. Now, it was a solo shot of her at what looked like a work event. She had been untagging herself from photos I posted of us together, and had become increasingly private about our relationship online. Then came the confirmation I did not want but needed. Marcus called me one Tuesday evening while I was working late. Jessie, I do not know how to tell you this, but I just saw Laura at Skyline Bar with a guy who definitely was not you, Marcus said hesitantly. Let me guess. Tall guy, dark hair, designer suit, I asked already, knowing the answer. Yeah. They looked pretty cozy. They were in a booth in the back, but they were definitely holding hands. I am sorry, man. I thanked Marcus for telling me. While the news hurt deeply, it provided clarity. I was not crazy or paranoid. My instincts had been right all along. I decided not to confront Laura immediately. I needed time to process and plan my next steps. For the next few days, I maintained our normal routine while discreetly gathering more information. I checked our financial records, took photos of suspicious receipts, and documented the inconsistencies in her stories. Then came the night I discovered the full truth. I had told Laura I would be working late on a big project, which was true, but I finished earlier than expected. As I drove up our street around 9:30 p.m., I noticed an unfamiliar car parked about a block from our house. It was a black Audi, exactly the type of car Laura had mentioned David drove. My heart pounded as I parked a few houses down. I entered our home quietly through the side door that led into the kitchen. The house was not completely dark. I could see the soft glow of what was likely our bedroom light upstairs. Then I heard it. Laughter. Laura's distinctive laugh, followed by a deeper male chuckle. Moving silently up the stairs, I followed the sound to our bedroom. The door was partially open, and through the gap I saw them. Laura and David in our bed. The bed we had purchased together when we first moved into this house. The sight knocked the wind out of me, but I forced myself to stay calm. I pushed the door fully open. Well, this explains a lot, I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the chaos inside me. They both jumped. David scrambled to cover himself, while Laura just stared at me, her expression shifting from shock to something that looked almost like annoyance. Jessie, what are you doing home? She demanded, as if I was the one who had done something wrong. I live here, Laura. This is my house too. Or did you forget that while you were busy betraying our marriage, David started collecting his clothes? I should go, he mumbled. Yes, you should, I agreed, stepping aside to let him pass once he had pulled on his pants and shirt. After David left, I expected tears, apologies, or at least some show of remorse from Laura. Instead, she went on the offensive. You had no right to barge in on us like that. You invaded my privacy. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. Privacy. You were having an affair in our marital bed, and you were talking about privacy. Laura got dressed and folded her arms across her chest. Our marriage has been over for a long time, Jessie. We have grown apart. You do not make me happy anymore, and that justifies cheating. You could have talked to me. We could have gone to counseling, or if you were that unhappy, you could have asked for a divorce before jumping into bed with someone else." Laura scoffed. "Please, what are you going to do, divorce me? You cannot live without me, and you know it." Her words hit me like a slap, not because they were true, but because they revealed how little she thought of me. In her mind, I was so dependent on her that I would tolerate any betrayal just to keep her in my life. "Watch me," I said quietly, and walked out. I drove to Marcus's place, grateful when he opened the door without questions and offered me his spare room. That night was one of the most painful of my life. I barely slept, replaying the events of the last few months in my head, seeing all the signs I had tried so hard to ignore. My phone buzzed constantly with messages and calls from Laura. They started angry, accusing me of overreacting, then gradually shifted to pleas for me to come home so we could talk. I turned my phone off. I needed space to think clearly without her attempting to manipulate my emotions. The next morning, I called Kelly Thompson, a divorce attorney recommended by a colleague who had gone through a similar situation. I scheduled a consultation for later that day and spent the morning researching what I needed to know about divorce proceedings in our state. After meeting with Kelly, I had a clearer understanding of my options. She advised me to gather evidence of Laura's infidelity and financial behavior, as it could impact our divorce settlement. Though our state allowed no-fault divorces, proof of infidelity could affect decisions about our shared assets, especially if Laura had been spending our joint funds on David. I developed a strategic approach. First, I documented everything I knew about the affair, including dates, inconsistencies in Laura's stories, and witness accounts like Marcus seeing them together. I recovered receipts showing expenses Laura had made for dinners, hotels, and gifts, presumably for or with David. Next, I visited our bank and opened a separate account in my name only. I transferred half of our joint savings into this new account, leaving Laura's half untouched. Kelly had advised this was legal and reasonable, protecting my finances while not depriving Laura of her fair share. I also spoke with my manager at work, explaining my situation since David worked for the same company, albeit in a different department. This was not just for emotional support, but also to protect my professional reputation if Laura or David tried to create problems for me at work. Given the circumstances, my manager was understanding and arranged for me to work remotely for a few weeks while I sorted out my personal life. This distance from the office would help avoid uncomfortable encounters with David until more permanent arrangements could be made. Additionally, I hired a private investigator to document Laura and David's interactions. While I already had enough evidence for myself, Kelly suggested having professional documentation could be valuable if Laura contested the divorce or if negotiations became complicated. Throughout this process, Laura cycled through different tactics to regain control of the situation. When she realized I was serious about ending our marriage, her approach changed dramatically. She began calling my friends and family, painting herself as the victim of my sudden and unreasonable decision to leave. According to her, I had become controlling and suspicious for no reason, and she had only turned to David for emotional support because I had become so difficult to live with. Some mutual acquaintances initially believed her story, reaching out to encourage me to work things out with Laura. However, close friends like Marcus, who knew the truth, stood firmly by my side. Laura also tried using our shared history to emotionally manipulate me. She sent emails reminiscing about our early days together, texts about how much she missed me, and even had flowers delivered to Marcus's house with a note begging for another chance. "I made a mistake. Jesse," one message read. "Everyone deserves forgiveness. Are you really going to throw away 8 years because of one error in judgment?" I did not respond to these attempts at manipulation. Instead, I focused on moving forward with my plan, staying in regular contact with Kelly to ensure I was taking the right steps legally. The situation reached its climax when Laura discovered I had transferred money from our joint account. She also found out I had changed the locks on our house after retrieving my essential belongings when she was at work. She showed up at Marcus's house demanding to speak with me. Against Marcus's advice, I agreed to meet her, but only in a public place. We met at a coffee shop downtown the following afternoon. Laura arrived looking simultaneously angry and tearful, a combination I had seen her use effectively in past disagreements. "How dare you lock me out of our house and take money from our account?" she began, voice raised enough to draw attention from nearby tables. That is my house too, and my money. I remained calm. I took exactly half of our joint savings, Laura. Your half is still there untouched. As for the house, I changed the locks because I do not trust what you might do with our belongings while we sort this out. My lawyer advised me it was within my rights to secure my property. Your lawyer? She looked genuinely shocked. You actually hired a divorce attorney. This is really how you want to handle things. I nodded, then placed a folder on the table between us. This contains copies of receipts from restaurants, hotels, and jewelry stores. Expenses you made using our joint account for your affair with David. It also includes statements from people who saw you together, and photos the private investigator took of you two over the past week. Laura's face paled as she flipped through the documents. You told me you are not my property, Laura. Now I am proving that you are not my responsibility either. Not your lies, not your affair, and certainly not the consequences of your choices. Her expression shifted from shock to desperation. Jesse, please. I know I messed up badly, but we can fix this. We can go to counseling. I will end things with David immediately. Just give us another chance. For a brief moment, seeing her tears, I felt my resolve waver, but then I remembered the look of annoyance on her face when I caught her with David, the ease with which she had lied to me for months, and her cruel assumption that I was too weak to leave her. There is no us to fix anymore, Laura. The divorce papers have been filed. You will receive your copy officially soon. All the terms are fair. I am not trying to punish you. I just want this to be over so we can both move on. I stood up to leave, but Laura grabbed my wrist. You will regret this, Jesse. I will take everything in court. The house, your savings, everything. I gently removed her hand. You can try, but the documentation in that folder might make your lawyer advise against it. I suggest you read through it carefully before making threats. Walking away from that coffee shop, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. The confrontation I had dreaded was over, and I had maintained my dignity throughout. The next challenge came at work. While I had been working remotely, I eventually had to return to the office. My first day back, I requested a meeting with David through HR with a representative present. During this meeting, I was direct but professional. I do not want to create a hostile work environment, but given what has happened, I think it is reasonable to request that we work in different sections of the office and minimize contact. David, looking uncomfortable throughout, quickly agreed. It seemed he had not expected me to handle the situation so calmly and professionally, perhaps anticipating an angry confrontation instead. News travels fast in any workplace. Though neither of us discussed the details openly, colleagues soon figured out the general situation. To my surprise, many expressed subtle support for me, from kind words during lunch breaks to offers to help with projects so I could leave early for attorney meetings. Laura made one last attempt to gain the upper hand by contacting our friends, trying to rally support for her side of the story. But the evidence was too clear and her behavior too inconsistent. Even friends who had initially been on the fence began to distance themselves from her, especially after hearing her different and contradicting versions of events. Finally, after weeks of back and forth with lawyers, Laura signed the divorce papers. Our house would be sold with proceeds split evenly after the mortgage was paid off. Our other assets were divided fairly, and since we had no children, the process was less complicated than it might have been. The day I received confirmation that the divorce was finalized, I sat alone in my new apartment, feeling a complex mix of sadness and relief. A chapter of my life had ended, but a new one was beginning. For the first time in months, I slept peacefully through the night. The months following my divorce were focused on healing and rebuilding. Initially, I threw myself into work as a distraction, but I soon recognized this was not a healthy long-term strategy. Through a colleague's recommendation, I joined a support group for people going through divorces and separations. Sitting in a circle with others who understood exactly what I was experiencing proved incredibly therapeutic. I learned that my feelings of betrayal, anger, and occasional moments of weakness where I missed Laura despite everything were all normal parts of the grieving process for a failed relationship. One of the most important lessons I learned was about forgiveness. Not for Laura's sake, but for my own. Carrying anger and resentment was only hurting me, not her. This did not mean excusing her actions or wanting her back in my life. Rather, it meant accepting what had happened and choosing to move forward unburdened by bitterness. My friendship with Marcus deepened during this period. He had stood by me without judgment through the worst moments, offering both practical help and emotional support. Through him, I began expanding my social circle, meeting new people who knew me only as Jesse, not as one half of a failed marriage. Physical exercise became another crucial part of my healing process. I started running every morning, finding that the combination of physical exertion and quiet time to think helped clear my mind. Over time, I added weight training and even joined a recreational basketball league, rediscovering activities I had enjoyed before my marriage but had gradually abandoned. Professional therapy also played a vital role in my recovery. My therapist, Dr. Winters, helped me identify patterns from my relationship with Laura that I needed to understand to avoid repeating in the future. I learned about setting healthy boundaries and recognizing red flags I had previously ignored. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, my company promoted me to a senior financial analyst position. The role came with increased responsibility, but also greater satisfaction. I had channeled much of my emotional energy into professional growth, and it was paying off. I heard through mutual connections that Laura and David were still together, though rumors suggested their relationship was already showing signs of strain. Apparently, David had been seen with another woman from their marketing department. While this information might once have given me a sense of vindication, I was surprised to find I felt nothing but mild pity for Laura. She was repeating the same cycle with someone who had already proven his willingness to participate in deception. The true test of my healing came unexpectedly at a company-wide conference. I turned a corner and found myself face-to-face with Laura, who was attending as a representative from her department. For a moment, we both froze, unsure of the protocol for this situation. "Hello, Jesse," she said finally. "You look well." "Thank you," I replied. "You too." A brief, awkward silence followed before I excused myself politely and continued to my next session. What struck me most about the encounter was what I did not feel. No anger, no longing, no regret. Just the neutral acknowledgement of someone who had once been important in my life, but no longer held power over my emotions. A few weeks after the conference, I met Sophia at a fundraising event organized by a mutual friend. She was intelligent, compassionate, and refreshingly straightforward. Our conversation flowed naturally, touching on everything from books we had recently read to our career aspirations. When I eventually told Sophia about my divorce, I was able to do so without the emotional rawness that had characterized earlier attempts to discuss it. She listened attentively, asked thoughtful questions, and shared some of her own past relationship experiences. What I appreciated most about Sophia was her respect for boundaries. She was independent and encouraged the same in me. We enjoyed spending time together, but also valued our separate interests and friend groups. It was a healthier dynamic than anything I had experienced with Laura, built on mutual respect rather than control or dependency. Through my journey of heartbreak and recovery, I learned several profound lessons. First, that love is not about possession, but neither is it about abandoning all responsibility to each other. When Laura told me I did not own her, she was right. But what she failed to understand was that being in a committed relationship means voluntarily accepting certain responsibilities toward each other, not because of ownership, but because of love and respect. Second, I learned that "you are not my property" does not mean I do not need to respect our relationship. Freedom within a relationship never justifies betrayal. True freedom comes from honest communication and mutual agreements about boundaries. Perhaps most importantly, I learned to value myself enough to walk away from a situation that was damaging my dignity and emotional health. It took Laura's betrayal for me to recognize that I had been compromising too much of myself to maintain our relationship. The experience taught me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to let go of someone who is no longer good for you. This is not failure but growth, not weakness but tremendous strength. I do not regret my marriage to Laura despite how it ended. Those years contained both joy and valuable lessons. What I do regret is not recognizing the warning signs earlier and not having the confidence to address them directly, but regret serves little purpose except to inform better choices in the future. Today, I understand that a truly balanced relationship honors both individual freedom and mutual commitment. It respects personal boundaries while acknowledging shared responsibilities. It thrives on trust, not suspicion, and on honesty, not manipulation. Sometimes proving someone is not your responsibility is the best way to show respect for both them and yourself. The most expensive lesson I ever learned was that true freedom comes not from controlling others, but from knowing when to let go. Have you ever had to make the difficult decision to walk away from someone toxic in your life? How did you find the strength to do it? And what did you learn from the experience? Share your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more stories about overcoming life's challenges. Remember that your worth is not determined by those who failed to value you. Thank you for listening, and I wish you the courage to respect yourself enough to walk away when necessary.